Hey guys, this is going to be the in-depth review of Dune. Recently read this for a second time, and I approached it a completely different way as an adult. When I first read it, I was in my teenage years, early high school, middle high school, something like that, and I really appreciated this a whole lot more. Since the time that I read it the first time, I became a Christian, so I did look at it a little differently with religious leadership and the way that I would have never thought about it in the past. Also, I looked at it from a parent's perspective. So I saw a lot more from Duke Leto that I never saw the first time I read it, and I wanted to talk about those things with you a little bit here. This is going to be full of spoilers. Before I start the spoilers, though, I want to give you Nikki's spoiler-free review. We did a buddy read on Bookie Club. If you want to join that, or if you already have joined that, we're starting a new book very soon. Right now, we're looking at Hyperion by Dan Simmons, maybe. Dreamer's Pool by Juliet Marlier. Magica Recluse by Ellie Modesitt Jr. or I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. So between those four books, if you just want to hop on Bookie Club and give me a quick vote on what you might want to read, and whichever one gets the most votes, we'll read together. So here's Nikki's spoiler-free review real quick.
You guys know what sandworms are in Dune. If you don't, where are you? Hey guys, it's Nikki, and today I'm here to share my thoughts on Dune by Herbert that I recently buddy read with Ramsey from Rajathon in February. Before I jump into my thoughts on the book itself, I wanted to thank Ramsey so much for sending me this copy of Dune. When I saw Ramsey was talking about Dune on his channel, I reached out to him and I said, hey, I wanted to read Dune forever. And he said, well, why don't you buddy read? And I was so excited for that. I was so down, and he was so kind to me and sent me this copy. When we were talking about it, he looked at the prices and he said, wow, the difference between Canadian and US book prices, you guys get gouged on a lot of it. And I said, yeah, actually we do. So I was very surprised when he found out a really good deal, and he purchased a copy for me and sent it my way. And I said to him that hopefully if we decide to go on with the series, that book 2 would be on me. So thank you again, Ramsey, for sending this my way. I really enjoyed getting to read this with you. Before I get into my thoughts, I wanted to show you guys though, although Ramsey sent me that awesome copy, as you guys saw in the beginning clip, I actually have a special edition copy. So my husband went out and bought me this copy for Valentine's Day, and I was shocked, and I said to him, I was like, but Ramsey sent me a copy. So my husband went out and bought this before Ramsey and I had even read Dune yet, or before I had read it. I know Ramsey read it way back when. And I kind of laughed because this edition is $55 Canadian, and I thought my husband was crazy that he bought this for me, not even knowing if I enjoyed the book and if I planned to go on with the series or not. So I thought that was kind of funny. But my husband was just so excited that I was reading it because it's one of his favorite movies. He loves Dune. So I think he kind of bought this more for him. Even though he'll never read this massive book. But yeah, anyways, so that's really cool. This is a really pretty edition. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I'm happy to own it. You guys aren't here to hear me discuss an edition of a book. So let's get into my thoughts on Dune. My review will not be anywhere as good as Ramsey. I love Ramsey's reviews. He just has a way with words. I will say that jumping into Dune, I was worried about 3 things. First, I was worried about the size of the book. Now, I have no problem reading a chunkster of a book at all. I quite enjoy them. But when the book is 20, I think it's 20 books into the series, and each one of them is quite large, that can get a little intimidating because if each book is large, the series is large. You know, if you love book 1 and you want to carry on with the series, it's a lot to commit to. The other thing that kind of worried me jumping into this was that Dune is known to be very political, and political reads are very hit and miss with me. And I do hear a lot of controversy about Dune. A lot of people love it or they don't. The other thing is that because it's so political and because there's so many different characters and like planets and all of this going on, that it would get very confusing. So I was worried that I might get a little confused and that I would need to jump into the appendix to kind of wrap my head around it. But I didn't find that to be a problem. So I gave Dune a 4 out of 5 stars. I probably could have given it a 5. I don't know. I'm sure there's some reasons why in the moment when I gave it a 4, that was my rating. But I really, really enjoyed Dune. The characters are so well put together. The storyline is fantastic. I love that you can really enjoy a character, and then that character that was loyal, that seemed like they were going to be one of your favorites throughout the whole storyline, ended up basically being corrupt, and they were backstabbing, or there was things going on behind the scenes that you weren't sure about till you got into later on into the story. I also love the description in this story. I'm one of those people that really loves a character driven story, but it has to have the perfect balance of storyline, of plot, of description, so I can really feel and imagine it in my head while reading it. And Frank did a perfect job. There was a great balance between the characters and the plot, the storyline. I felt as if I knew the characters, knew their background, really understood them, saw where they were coming from, whether they were good or they were bad. I really felt like I could picture the scenery. I knew what was going on in the story, where we were. I felt like I could really picture the moment in each scene, in each setting, especially the worms. I'm sorry, I don't like giving away spoilers, but you guys know, I'm sure you guys know what the sandworms are in Dune. If you don't, where are you? I also really enjoyed getting to know the whole premise on the blue eyes. That's something that really pulled me into the story, that a lot, if not all, but most of the people in this world have these glowing blue eyes. I really was interested to know the reason or the background behind that, and that was a huge pull for me on why I wanted to read Dune. And yeah, it was really, really good. I think if you want to know more about this book, you need to just keep listening to Ramsey, because he describes this book perfectly. I don't know why I took so long to read it. I'm very thankful to have buddy read it with Ramsey. It is a fantastic read. If you are concerned about the size of the books, they are monsters, or the length of the series, and that's kind of holding you off, or maybe the thought about it being very political, or that it may get confusing because there's just so much going on, also puts you off from this book, don't let it put you off, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to going on with the series. I'm not sure when I will have time to do that, as I have a lot of review books, but I am very excited to do so. And if I can do it, and if I can get into it, I'm sure you can as well. But be prepared. Be prepared to be committed to this series, because it may take a while to get through. Anyhow, loved it. Thank you again, Ramsey, for buddying read it with me. I'm sure there's a lot more discussion that you and I can have on this book, or on this series in general. And again, thank you for this copy. I really enjoyed it. This was much easier to sit down and read than that special edition copy. Anyhow, that's it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you guys later. Bye.
All right, so I am going to do a bit more of a in-depth review. Hers was spoiler-free. I understand she's not big into spoilers. That way, if you guys want to take off, I will have all her info down in the description below, and you don't have to worry about being spoiled if you haven't read Dune yet. And then I'm going to go through my talking points. I have 5 points. I want to go over Herbert's message about charismatic leadership. I want to go over the wonderful way that he crafted Fremen culture, prophecy, politics of the Imperium, and what I look forward to in Book 2. So Dune is the story about struggle. This is what I talked about in my early review. If you want my spoiler-free review, it's going to be linked above as well. It's amazing. It's a tale crafted by Frank Herbert, who has since passed away. And I'm just so excited to share my thoughts on this one. Starting with my first thought, Herbert's message about charismatic leadership. He talked about how charismatic leadership can carry you on to do horrible things. How we hand power to a charismatic person, and they can take fanaticism, which we see in the Fremen at the end of the story, and carry it to a what they called in the book the worldwide jihad. I don't want to parallel it with Muslim culture. I don't think that's what Herbert was trying to do. I know we think a lot of that post 9/11 of jihad being Muslim religion. And I don't think in any way that's what Herbert was trying to do here. I think he was trying to put the idea of a holy war situated on the idea of a charismatic leader. The idea where he wanted to say, this charismatic leader, you will do what he says to do. And not only will you do that, you will be willing to do it in a way that even if he dies, you will carry on this jihad, right? And Herbert crafted that in a very particular way, and from what I've heard in the later books, his children are treated in that same very particular way, where his charismatic leadership has given the Fremen the license to do this jihad, right? And he even had prescient visions of how his people would sweep out and kill billions of people. And it was amazingly poignant to see from a religious perspective where that could take things, why I always believe that the church and the state need to be separate. Because whereas if we perceive any law breaking as sin, then you are sinning against God by not following the rules made by man. And that's a scary scenario. And when, we've seen charismatic leaders like the leaders in Russia and Nazi Germany and kings and these leaders, and I think that's what Herbert was really trying to dispel, the idea of a charismatic leader being able to go and do things. You look at Trump's not nearly this bad, but when you look at people who say that he can do no wrong, and then there's other people that believe on the same hand that he can do no right, and he's human like the rest of us, right? I'm not I didn't vote for the man, but we take it to another level. We take it to a level where he's not human anymore. Like, what have we created with this charismatic leader? And imagine 100 times ramped up from that what happened with Paul, what the Imperium thought of him, and how they thought of him as a demon, and where the Fremen thought of him as a god. What kind of power are we giving these leaders? And I think that's what Herbert was trying to go there. I probably rambled on a little too long, but the Fremen culture. What I was really, really amazed with was the Fremen culture. The way that they revered water, the way that they learned to adapt in the harshest of environment, where not only is it is desert that is almost devoid of water completely. And the way that they just moved, the way they did things, the way they planned, the way they, were part of the desert pretty much. The way that they treated the worms, the way the worms interacted. Like, I'm excited because I've heard so much more of worms and the mythology of the worms and what's going on with the water, why the water's not coming. If Arrakis can actually be green one day, like they've done in the south of Arrakis. And it's exciting to really dive into that, really dig deep into what might be going on there, what might be the future of Arrakis in Book 2, Book 3, even more and more and more. So the Fremen culture, just the way they're willing to die. Like, there was a moment where Paul had to challenge Stilgar, and Paul kind of turned it all on its head, but he said, why are we killing off our best? Where it was survival of the fittest. It was, if you were a little bit better than the one above you, you killed him and took over, right? The leader of the siege, Stilgar, was obviously not as good of a fighter as Paul was, because Paul had been trained at it since a child. Like, I hear a lot of things about Paul where people say that Paul's like just a superhero. Well, he was genetically engineered by the Bene Gesserit, and through that genetic engineering, he was given Mentat training on top of that, and then he was taught the Weirding Way by Jessica, where he basically is a super soldier before he learned some of the stuff about the Fremen. And then, he was trained as a Fremen by Stilgar, who was probably the best Fremen out there. And then all the young men wanted him to challenge Stilgar and take control of his siege. But Paul just says, no, 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 I am over all of Arrakis. I'm not over just this one siege. I am going to lead all of you. And it was neat to see that and how he really just turned it on his head and said, there's no reason to kill Stilgar. Stilgar's one of my best soldiers. Why would I cripple myself by killing someone so good just because I want to assume leadership? There's not a good idea. We're not going to continue doing it. And that was really, really great. I enjoyed that part of the book. I couldn't remember what happened there, and I was looking forward to it. There were great characters, side characters. You had Stilgar, you had Gurney Halleck, Thufir Hawat, Duncan Idaho. All these were really great side characters that it was neat to see them kind of fleshed out a little bit. They didn't get fleshed out a ton, but I've heard we get more of them in the books coming on. Um, Not sure about Duncan Idaho. I'm pretty sure he's dead, but you never know with fantasy books, sci-fi books. People could come back. So one of the coolest things about the prophecy is that Paul and Jessica knew what the prophecy was, and that the Bene Gesserit had basically embedded themselves in prophecy for the entirety of human culture. Like they had gone and given these Fremen people who had lived on this planet, who had hundreds and hundreds of years ago heard this prophecy about a boy that would come one day. The son of a Bene Gesserit would come and be their prophesied Messiah. And it was really imaginative to think of just like embedding small prophecies into lifestyle, and that they would live by these prophecies. And by the time that Paul arrived, maybe even 1,000 years later, I'm not sure when the prophecy started, it would be so powerful that they couldn't do anything but follow the prophecy, right? And maybe that was Herbert's way of saying that religious fanaticism is not a good thing. And I don't want to assume that that's exactly where he was going, but through that idea, I think it was really interesting to see. Then the politics of the Imperium was really, really cool. It was basically like imperial politics and Chone Corporation, and they butted heads. And the control of spice was the most important thing, and spice always had to flow. That is one of the most interesting dynamics that you can see, where we see it today, and I think Herbert was trying to factor in on that, the idea of money versus political power, and how one bolsters the other, and then one how they interact with one another. And it was capitalism at its worst, and that's something that I think we really have to look at, and we have to imagine, right? Is socialism going to work? I don't think so. But is flat out pure capitalism going to work? I don't think so. I think Herbert was really just trying to give us an idea on what we would look like in a government thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years from now, what we would hold on to and what we would get rid of. So we've gone to more of a imperial style with an emperor and dukes and duchesses and this idea, right, where royal lines are still a thing, but also we've gone to a highly funded corporation, where I would assume that presidencies eventually would take over, where we would elect all of our leaders. But no, in this instance, no, it is political marriages, and it's put on that way. Maybe that is what we as fantasy sci-fi nerds are looking for, and that's where Herbert was going, or he really thought that we would go back to an imperial system or a monarchical system. And that was neat to dive into, on what sci-fi would do when we're 10,000 years from now, when we've conquered the planets and we've moved into the greater solar system. And the final point I want to bring up is what I look forward to in book 2. I really want to learn more about the other planets other than just Arrakis. I want to learn more about the politics that we have going forward, where Paul's kind of turned everything on its head. I want to learn more about how spice is made. I understand it's very much connected to the worms and how it works with the worms. Also, I've heard a lot of the books after book 2 have to do with his children. So how much do they factor into book 2? I remember reading book two, but I don't remember a lot about it. There's one thing I remember, and it's probably the biggest like aha moment of book two. So I really want to dig back into it and look at it with adult eyes. So I've got Dune Messiah right here. I'm excited to get to it next month, maybe probably the month of June. We'll dive into this and we'll really get it, get a good grasp on it. It's not as long, so it might be an easier read for me to hop into. And I'm hoping that maybe some of you guys would join me on this journey. This was a lot of fun. It is definitely my favorite science fiction novel of all time. Easy 5-star rating for me, and I loved Dune. I hope more people will pick up Dune and enjoy it. Thank you guys so much for checking out this review. I hope it finds you well. And if you want, go ahead and join social media. I have Twitter, Discord, where I'm doing some book reading updates, giveaways on there sometimes as well. And then Goodreads, if you like that platform. Most people find it annoying, but some people really like it. So I will talk to you guys next time. Thank you and goodbye.